Welcome to the Ex Terra Podcast. The Ex Terra mission is to explore and discuss the business of space and its effect on the national and global economy, as well as life on Earth. How does what happens in space affect your life every day? That's what we're exploring on the Ex Terra website, as well as on this podcast. My guests today are Nicolas Gaume and Jason Andrews, co-founders of Orbite, which provides state-of-the-art astronaut preparation across all types of vehicles, as well as luxury accommodations, dining, and recreation for future commercial astronauts, their friends and families, and other Orbite customers. And gentlemen, thanks for joining me on the Ex Terra Podcast.
Pleasure to be here with you, Tom.
Thanks for having us.
Orbite just had its first class of civilian astronaut trainees, and I guess it's kind of no coincidence that comes as we've had the Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, and SpaceX Inspiration 4 flights. How did that go?
Well, it went amazingly well, Tom. I mean, let's say it's really the year one of commercial space flights. So indeed, the time is pretty exciting, and we see an amazingly growing interest in commercial space flight, and these opportunities are only the beginning. So a lot of very motivated people joined our first session, which went amazingly well.
And Jason, from your perspective, what did you think?
I think it exceeded our expectations. I mean, we started this company with a vision that while everybody else was building vehicles, we would focus on training and equipping the next generation of astronauts. And what we saw firsthand is just the excitement around the industry. And, like what we like to present this as a try before you buy opportunity. As an example, before you spend $400,000 on a Blue or Virgin flight, come to Orbite to see if you're, inclined to enjoy spaceflight. And our customers did just that. And it was an awesome experience. I mean, this is the only opportunity out there to actually sample all different vehicles. We educate you on spaceflight. We then allow you to do a virtual mission on a Blue Origin vehicle, a Virgin Galactic vehicle, Dragon with the cupola, and also on Starship. And it's just amazing because they've read about it, but they don't really understand the differences until you experience it firsthand. So they got a very real opportunity. I mean, some of our guests actually experienced the overview effect, even in virtual reality, which was super exciting. And then we give you the opportunity to then experience zero G and high G, and all that's done in a 3-day time frame. And there's just no other place where you can do that. And that's the benefit of Orbite is, you can actually train to be an astronaut and decide if you want to go to the next step and the next step and the next step. So that's what we do. And that's what we delivered on the first outing, and it was awesome.
How do you go ahead?
I want to add to what Jason said, which was perfectly capturing what we experienced. Really is also, not only do we want to bring the best of the technical expertise, the best, obviously, experience with high level hospitality, but we also want to give, in a way, a deeper connection with the space journey, a more spiritual one. It is a life-defining moment, and we really take that super seriously. We're very passionate about space, as probably a lot of your listeners and viewers are, but we really want to make sure that this opportunity to go to space is not benign, and it's something extremely important in a life, and we want to elevate and prepare. And so whatever the experience you're going to have, hopefully maximize the enjoyment and the feeling you will have going through that of out of the ordinary experience.
I wanted to ask, because Jason, something you said was interesting. How do you simulate all of those different spacecraft? Because I know that SpaceX and Blue Origin and such have not provided you with simulators that you can actually put people in. So how does that process work?
Yeah, it was not a collaborative effort. We had to go and use commercially available media to recreate these vehicles both on the outside and inside. And luckily, there's a lot of public information out there, a lot of images. There's now a lot of video showing, from Inspiration 4, but even before that on the NASA missions on what Dragon looks like on the inside. So it is our version of those vehicles, but I think it's also very real. And again, no one's put it in a virtual reality environment and then simulated these missions. So you're taking that's part of what our expertise is the engineering behind this. We train you to be astronauts, and we also understand these vehicles so we can prepare you properly for the journey.
How did you conceive of Orbite?
That's a great question. So
Words getting
Nicolas and
together.
yeah. Nicolas and I started this journey a while ago, and we came at it from two different, angles. I'm the son of a Boeing aerospace engineer. I've been in the industry my entire career, starting with Kistler Aerospace back in 1995, and started multiple companies with Andrews Space, Spaceflight, and Black Sky, and ultimately Spaceflight Industries. But I always had this passion for commercial human spaceflight, believing that was the future of where it was going. And Nicolas followed a different journey, growing up in his family hotel and doing every job there was there in a hospitality business. And he is also a serial entrepreneur. He started far more companies than I've started, and in tech and other space. And our paths crossed in approximately 2015 when one of his businesses, Space Cargo Unlimited, was looking at sending experiments into space. And my company, Spaceflight, specialized in launching small payloads cost effectively. So we got to know each other, but unfortunately, we didn't do business because Nicolas had a requirement to bring his cargo back. I think everyone knows it today as high value bottles of Petrus 2000 wine. Spaceflight could launch them, but they couldn't recover them. And so we got to know each other, appreciate each other's as entrepreneurs. And I think we had this shared passion for the future of space. And so when we had the opportunity, we were both living in Seattle in 2018 and 19 timeframe, and got together and talked about what was next. And next is this future of commercial human spaceflight. And if we wanted to combine our joint passions, for me, it's, putting things into space and ultimately people into space. And for Nicolas, it's the, preparing people for the journey and the hospitality that comes along with that. So that's our origin story, and Nicolas can embellish on that.
No, well said, Jason. You captured it all. I think it's really where we try to bridge. Most of these amazing companies building these vehicles are vehicle centric, and we really want to be people centric. And when you look at the experience, the journey ahead, it has to be the level of engineering excellence and passion that Jason is bringing to our team and our partnership. And I probably bring my own passion and my own journey into my space startup, but indeed, as Jason said, all the foundational passion I have for hospitality and service and really serving experiences.
And we will get to some of that a little bit later on, but I know you're both involved in other new space ventures. So talk a little bit about what else you're involved in.
Nicolas, do you want to go?
I can share that you didn't allude to it, but I have this company called Space Cargo Unlimited, which is really working on the in-space manufacturing opportunity. We believe that space has much to offer, and that's really a bounding pact between Jason and I. That's the passion that we have. But I've been starting this journey a few years back now to help find solution and better products on Earth. The one I've been focusing on is agriculture, and specifically viticulture. And we've been growing vine on the ISS by surviving the absence of gravity. They gain some better resilience to lesser stresses, namely the climate change related stresses. And to fund this, let's say, out of the ordinary research project, we did age these bottles of wine. And we're selling them to fund the future of that research. So it's actually moving greatly. It's an exciting journey in itself.
And this is actually Nicolas's second appearance on the Ex Terra podcast. We talked extensively about that wine experiment a few months ago. And I know that you did bring the wine back and you got it uncorked. And tell us how that turned out.
Well, probably when Jason and I have the fortune to open our complex that we'll be announcing later this year or early next year in the US, we probably will have a nice opportunity to have on the wine menu of our restaurant one of these space wine bottles. So I invite you to come then, Tom, and we will be able to share with your listener gladly. But it is unique, it's different, and funny enough, it's we don't really know why. It's an amazing wine in itself, but it's very space made it very unique. And space made things very unique in general, but that is also true for that wine.
And Jason, what about you? What else are you involved in?
So I have several previous companies that I founded, and many of them have exited. I started Andrews Space, co-founded it with my wife in 1999, and we were a small system integrator and then became a small satellite producer. In 2010, because we had no way to launch these small satellites to space, I started Spaceflight, which was the first company to commercialize rideshare successfully. We didn't invent the concept, but we were the first to make it commercially viable. And it allowed all these small satellite constellations to proliferate and ultimately led to the rise of all these micro launchers out there. And then in 2013, I started a company called Black Sky, which was taking the satellites we were producing in Andrews Space and the launch services we had with spaceflight and deploying our own constellation to look at the planet in real time, think Google Earth Live. In 2015, we rolled all those companies together to create Spaceflight Industries. And then in 2018, we did a joint venture with Thales Alenia Space, and the satellite production company spun out to create LeoStella, a leading small satellite producer here in the United States, based in the Seattle area. Spaceflight, my second company, was sold to Mitsui Corporation in 2019, maybe it was 20. And then this past month, Black Sky went public via the SPAC process. So all my companies have exited. This is the only space company I'm working on at the moment. I'm a director for a small launch company. But other than that, I have some other ventures that are outside of the space industry, really focused on humanitarian needs and providing water and power to those who need it most.
How different would your career path have been if there were the Virgin Orbits and Rocket Labs and those kinds of companies that are doing the small satellite launches now when you first got involved in that?
That's an interesting question. So, I mean, Andrews Space was there in 2003, 4, and 5 when the micro launchers tried the first time. I mean, we had it's called a DARPA Falcon contract. It was Elon's first government contract for the Falcon 1 in 2004. So we were competitors way back in the day. So we've always been there watching these small satellite launchers go, but there wasn't a business plan that worked. It was a chicken and the egg problem. Without the market demand, you couldn't justify the development of the launcher. And so it really wasn't until spaceflight came around and stimulated the demand for all these satellites. We took it from buying a rocket for, at the time, 2010, $60 million was the cheapest rocket on the planet. We would allow people to launch CubeSats for $300,000-$400,000. And so we had this proliferation with Planet, Inspire, and all these companies you still hear about today, which created this demand, which allowed these small satellite launchers to come around in 2014 and 15. And they could finally have the market they could point to so that the VCs would give them money. So that, if you go back and look at the Rocket Labs and Fireflies and Astras, they all kind of popped up in the 14, 15, 16 timeframe. And it was really because of the market developed by spaceflight. And we needed them at the time. In 2014, we were launching mostly on Russian rockets. And then Putin invaded Crimea and it shut off access to that supply. And we didn't have anywhere to go. So we bought a Falcon 9, which was a big, audacious thing to do, especially in 2015. That vehicle was called Sun Synchronous Express, SSOA, and it flew in 2018. And now that's the model that everyone's using. SpaceX is using that model. And I'm excited that all these small launch vehicles are out there and starting to proliferate. So yeah, it would have been a lot easier, but it wouldn't have been possible at the same time. I think this evolution was really important and necessary. And I think that's where Nicolas and I feel like, okay, if the 2010 decade was about the small satellite revolution, the 2020 decade is really about the commercial human spaceflight revolution. And we're excited to be here and really about defining that category. Because again, while everyone else is focused on building vehicles, to your original question, no one's really focused on training and equipping this next generation of people who are going to go to space, either for pleasure or also for profession. And so we're really there. As Nicolas said, we're people-centric, we're experience-centric. We're there to make sure everyone is properly trained and equipped so that they have a very positive experience. And that's what we're passionate about. You can probably see that on this podcast and what we're excited to build here in the coming years.
Which brings us very nicely back to present day. Let's talk about what all is involved. And you've touched on this, but let's go a little bit more in depth on what is involved in the training program.
Yeah, well, I'll get maybe Jason go more into the details, but we really want to make sure we touch every aspect of the journey, and certainly understanding the various vehicle opportunities, understanding what it takes physically, mentally to get, and then really touching key elements like how you feed yourself in space. But more profoundly, it's also making sure we do something very tailored. One of us has a different view of life, of extreme experience. And as Jason and I said, going to space is not a trivial experience, even though it's in and we're excited about that, more accessible, there's still many obstacles. So it's important to know what is driving you. So also there's a lot of elements of coaching and support in the process. Now, on more of the experience itself, maybe Jason, you can give a more depth to the training itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone recognizes, we've seen enough movies, that you just don't get off the couch, strap into a rocket and go. At least you're not going to enjoy it. You might survive it. And, NASA has spent 5-6 decades defining what it takes to train astronauts to go to space. And we're at this point where we have the European Space Agency, NASA, other space agencies, but they only train government employees. There's no one to train commercial astronauts, general public. And I think we saw that with Inspiration 4. That was the first time we actually had to go train people who were not at NASA astronauts. And so we are taking the best techniques that NASA's refined over those 5 decades and incorporating them into a commercial spaceflight gateway complex and astronaut training complex. The challenge is, NASA will spend 2 years training an astronaut before they fly. We have to condense that to a matter of weeks and months. So we'll have the equipment that you would expect, like a centrifuge to simulate high G environment. We will have medical clinics because we're there to make sure you go there safely and you're monitored along the way. As Nicolas talked about, we'll also take care of other things like your food and your culinary needs. What you eat in space is really important. What you eat, in your daily life is really important. So we're thinking holistically about everything that you're going to need to go there and building that into this facility, which, as Nicolas described, we'll announce a little bit later here where it's going to be and what it'll take. But it's going to be a full astronaut training complex. It's a place where you're going to go and train for days. If it's a suborbital flight, weeks if it's an orbital flight, and ultimately months if you want to think about going to the moon and Mars someday here in the near future. And you'll stay there and your family will visit you, and it's going to be really amazing.
We're talking with Nicolas, Gaume, and Jason Andrews, co-founders of the astronaut training company Orbite, on the Ex Terra Podcast. Take a moment right now and click subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of the podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube, any of the videos from Ex Terra, the Journal of Space Commerce. Gentlemen, who is the primary market that you're targeting right now?
So we are focused on people who are preparing to go to space, whether they can afford to go there today or they have a dream of going there at some point in the future. But whereas the current perception is only billionaires can go to space. And I think what we just saw last week with Inspiration 4 is really anyone can go to space. Yes, it's going to be expensive, but that price is going to come down. So we're really there to train anyone, the general public, and offer the opportunity to experience astronaut training at any economic level that anyone can afford. We're there to prepare you if you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars before you go spend millions of dollars. But if you also just want to, we think a lot of our customers will come and train, hoping they can go someday. And we also make our training facilities and experiences available to the general public. Maybe you can't afford a whole 1-week package, but you can afford a 4-hour high G experience, or go and work on a spacesuit, or go do a virtual reality mission simulation. So when the facility opens, it's the place to go experience space at whatever level suits your desire and your economic capabilities.
Nicolas, anything to add to that?
No, Jason named it perfectly. I mean, this is very important for us to be open to anyone. We also want to make sure that we grow in multiple countries. We're obviously starting in the US. That's where the commercial new space revolution is happening. But we also have a broad ambition to be able to open other complex in multiple geography around the world.
Who is your pool of instructors?
Well, we're very fortunate to have an amazing lead instructor, Brianna Romes, plus a number of very, very amazing contributors. But we will really make sure we have the most effective coaches, the most knowledgeable professionals and experts. A few names you want to drop, and I can share for the European ones, maybe less relevant to your US audience. So Jason, maybe you can share more about our upcoming training, which is going to happen early December in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah. So as Nicolas said, Brianna Romes is our director of astronaut training. She spent 12 years at NASTAR. NASTAR is where you go to train pilots for high G experience, hypoxia, and they've also using their centrifuge, have trained most of the astronauts that have gone to space commercially or will go to space. Inspiration 4 trained there. Most of the Virgin passengers have trained there. She trained Richard Branson. So it's great to have this deep capability, but we're also blessed to bring in existing astronauts, past and current, to share their experiences and knowledge about what it's like to go to space, what it's like to experience an overview effect, how to mentally prepare for very uncomfortable experiences. I mean, I think we all recognize that high G and zero G is something that we have no common knowledge of in our everyday life. So it is uncomfortable. And so it's a lot of preparing people, as Nicolas says, mentally, physically, and spiritually for this off-world adventure. And we're excited to unveil more about who we have going forward. Our next opportunity to do astronaut orientation, this is the training, mission simulation, zero G and potentially high G. Our next session is the first weekend of December in Orlando, Florida, based at the Four Seasons Resort. So it's a great opportunity to come down and experience it firsthand if people want to learn more about what is Orbite and what we will be doing in the future.
You've mentioned a couple of times the Inspiration 4 mission, and quite honestly, the only criticism that I've heard that the crew had when they came back was about the bathroom facilities. How do you guys address those kinds of issues in your training, and how do you manage those expectations?
We're both laughing because that's one of our big discussion points. I mean, these initial flights in a small capsule, you're going to have a little bit of the right stuff. These are, I think, the general public's, exploring what it was actually like during Apollo and to a certain extent the space shuttle to live and work in space. And I think for the next few years, that's going to be the challenge until we have bigger operational systems like Starship that come online, in which case it's not 4 people in a small capsule. You're going to have your own stateroom with potentially your own restroom and whatnot. So things will improve, but that's where training comes in. We will put our trainees before they go into space in team building and sometimes uncomfortable positions so that, they train for it and they have that bathroom experience, positive or negative, before they go to space, so that when they go to space, it'll be routine and common day so that they'll enjoy it. I think we anticipated that personal needs is one of the biggest things that's been overlooked in human spaceflight, because these were all government employees and test pilots, and they were told just fine, suck it up and get it done. But we recognize that these next generation of people, people who are used to a high level of comfort because they're all wealthy individuals, are going to be in some really uncomfortable situations. So that's one of the things that we're really focused on.
On your website, it says, learn what it's like to live in space from VIP guest speakers and enjoy an unforgettable Michelin star culinary space food lab and dining event. So Nicolas, I think this is kind of more in your ballpark, but talk about this connection between food and space.
Well, it's everything that is related to being a human that in space is questioned. And as we really were very dedicated to provide the best experience possible, we want to make sure that people that train with us have really a good appreciation of the complexity of some of the daily tasks or the obvious things you would do on Earth, and really appreciate what is the best out there. You always have a choice, and certainly in the way you mentally prepare. Again, food is a core component of our lives. It's the base of the Maslow pyramid. So we had a chance to share what is the day-to-day experience of eating on the space station with food from the multiple agencies around the world. And all the agencies have realized that good food is essential to morale and the balance and psychological balance of being in a confined environment and interacting with others. So they have actually introduced a number of special meals that will be, for special occasion, for celebrations. We were very fortunate in talking about VIP guests to have the head of the French Space Agency as one of our guests. And he brought along with him the special meals that are prepared by 3-star Michelin chef Alain Ducasse and his team, Ducasse Conseil. And they've been working for the past I think more than a decade in making sure they would have food that would be both good and obviously compatible with the constraints related to a life on the ISS. So we actually think we were the first civilian to taste this food ever. And we made a number of nice experiments comparing the food as it was out of the can, tasting the food, how it would be prepared on Earth, see the difference, understand how the food is processed in space, make sure you also think about how you're going to maximize the enjoyment and really be practical about the way it's going to be able to provide the fundamental needs of your body and learn more about the body of an astronaut in space. So I think it was a very defining moment and a very excellent experience with special VIP guests. But I will want to call out that we equally tried to do the same on every aspects of our training. We actually had this amazing zero-G flight, but we wanted to make sure it would be more than just the mere physical experience Jason was referring to. So we were very fortunate to have the actual trainer of Thomas Pesquet, who's currently the ISS captain, the ESA astronaut. So she has, more than 15 years of training the ESA astronauts. So she came, took time to answer our questions and really go deep, up to the point she was our instructor aboard the zero-G flight. So she could be with us all throughout the day. So these are the type of very special guests and very special moment we offer to our guests.
I guess the concept most people have in their minds about food in space is applesauce in a bag that they're used to from Apollo and all the video that's been released by NASA.
Well, there's that too, and we saw what it is and we could see it, absolutely. But they're also more and more interesting and special thing. And honestly, as we go more into commercial space flight, these opportunities will grow. We also want to play a role in this. And again, we want to bring the best of astronaut training and the best hospitality combined together. So that's really something we're very passionate about too.
We're getting a little short on time, gentlemen, and I want to ask you both to respond to this question, and it's one that we ask all of our guests. Look out over the next 10 to 15 years and tell me from your perspective what you see coming in space commerce.
I mean, from my perspective, just watching what has changed in the last 10 years and projecting that forward is really inspiring. Like I said, in 2010, the cheapest rocket on the planet was $60 million, and it was impossible to get a small satellite to space. Look what's happened. Now launch is plentiful. The prices are coming down, and I think with the advent of these really large lift systems, led by Starship, but then you also have Blue Origin. Relativity has plans. Obviously, NASA has their capabilities. I think it's really going to open up what commerce can happen in low Earth orbit, but also finally, commercial routine operations out into deeper space, to destinations, whether it be the moon, potentially Mars. And so we just are excited that this is going to be a huge, literally a growth opportunity for everybody. I think we will, Elon has always had this dream of making the species multiplanetary and permanent in a permanent capability. I think we'll get there. And we're just really excited to play our part in this, in preparing everybody for that off-world experience and that off-world commerce. I alluded to it when we first started talking that we're training people who want to go to space both for pleasure and also profession. But we really believe in the next 10 to 20 years that more and more people are going to be living and working in space for a corporation. And so it's much about training them as it is about training people who are going to go there for the pleasure element and the vacation element of it.
And Nicholas?
I think Jason capture perfectly where we feel we are, and we really share the same view. I think it's really, and all of us are very aware of that. This is such a unique moment of humans back in space. I would only add to what Jason said, that we have one home planet. We should take care of it deeply. We believe in the overview effect as a defining moment to change your perspective. We believe that humans will greatly benefit from going to space for Earth. So that's just what I want to add. It's exciting, but let's take care of our homeworld very, very carefully.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a fascinating conversation. I want to thank you both for appearing on the podcast, and I look forward to learning more as you get your facility up and operating, and maybe coming down to Orlando and having a quick visit and meeting you in person. That'd be a lot of fun.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much, Tom.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Ex Terra Podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Be sure to click on subscribe to be sure you don't miss an episode of the podcast or any of our other videos. You can also get daily news at xterrajsc.com. And one thing more, to be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter at Ex Terra JSC. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for joining us.